Let's talk about the 11th century, a time when life was simple, short, and the most important question on everyone's mind was human resources. Specifically, who gets to appoint bishops? It sounds like the world's most boring board meeting, but this was everything. Bishops weren't just guys in fancy hats who waved incense around. They were mega landowners, tax collectors, and administrators. They were basically regional governors who could also, excommunicate you. So, the Holy Roman Emperor, a title that was consistently inaccurate on at least two of its three claims, thought it was his job to pick these guys. They were his vassals after all. He needed loyal managers. The Pope, however, was beginning to feel that appointing God's representatives should probably be handled by God's main representative. It's a classic corporate turf war, just with more clagues and less functional plumbing. Enter Hildebrand of Savannah, a man who spent decades as the papal power broker before finally becoming Pope Gregory VII in 1073. He was less a spiritual leader and more a divine CEO hell-bent on a hostile takeover. Gregory had this radical idea that the church should be, run by the church. Wild, I know. In 1075, he put out a memo called the Dictatus Papae. It wasn't a suggestion box. It was a 27-point list of papal mic drops. Points included, the Pope alone can use the imperial insignia. He may depose emperors. And my personal favorite, the Roman Church has never erred, nor will it err to all eternity. That's not confidence, that's the kind of statement you make right before you do something incredibly ill-advised. Meanwhile, in Germany, we have King Henry IV. He's been dealing with rebellious Saxon nobles since he was a teenager and has zero time for this papal power trip. His entire system of government relied on him appointing loyal bishops who would provide him with money and soldiers. It's a practice called simony, buying and selling church offices. And while technically a sin, it was also how the entire empire functioned. When Gregory told him to stop, Henry's reaction was, essentially, "You and what army?" He gathered his German bishops, who were quite happy with the current arrangement, and they all voted to depose Gregory. Henry sent a letter to Gregory addressed not to the Pope, but to Hildebrand, at present not Pope, but false monk, the medieval equivalent of an all-caps email with the entire company CC'd. It was on. Gregory received Henry's letter and did not take it well. Shocking. He responded by pulling out the biggest weapon in the papal arsenal, excommunication. This wasn't just being kicked out of the church club. It meant Henry was declared an outlaw. Crucially, it dissolved all oaths of fealty his subjects had sworn to him. All those German nobles Henry had just barely gotten under control, they suddenly had a divinely sanctioned excuse to rebel. And they did. Immediately. They gave Henry a deadline. Get unexcommunicated within a year and a day, or we're electing a new king. Suddenly, Henry's "you and what army" question had a very clear and very scary answer: everyone else's. So Henry had a choice: lose his kingdom or go apologize. He chose apology, theatrically. In the dead of winter, 1077, Henry, his wife, and their infant son crossed the Alps. This was not a ski trip. The sources describe them sliding down icy slopes on their backsides. The Pope, meanwhile, was waiting for Henry in Germany, but heard he was coming and got spooked. He retreated to the nearly impenetrable castle of Canossa, owned by his powerful ally Matilda of Tuscany, one of the most formidable women of the Middle Ages. So now, the most powerful secular ruler in Christendom is sliding through the snow to beg forgiveness from a pope hiding in a fortress. The optics were, shall we say, not great for the imperial brand. When Henry arrived at Canossa on January 25th, Gregory made him wait. Outside, in the snow, for 3 days, barefoot and dressed as a penitent pilgrim. This is the most famous act of political groveling in history. But here's the genius of it. Henry wasn't just being humiliated, he was performing. By playing the part of the humble sinner, he was forcing Gregory to play the part of the merciful priest. A pope can't refuse to forgive a repentant Christian, especially one who puts on such a good show. On the 3rd day, Gregory had to let him in and lift the excommunication. Henry got what he needed. Gregory knew he'd been outmaneuvered. He had won the battle of appearances, but Henry had just won the war for his crown. Did everyone learn their lesson and live happily ever after? Of course not. This is history. As soon as Henry was back in power in Germany, he went right back to appointing his own bishops. The German nobles elected a rival king anyway, plunging the empire into a brutal civil war that lasted for years. Gregory excommunicated Henry again in 1080, but this time nobody cared. The shock value was gone. Henry responded by appointing his own pope, an anti-pope named Clement III. He then marched on Italy, captured Rome in 1084, and had his pet pope officially crown him emperor. Gregory VII, the man who made an emperor beg in the snow, ended up dying in exile, reportedly saying, "I have loved justice and hated iniquity, therefore I die in exile." A truly epic level of self-pity. The fight didn't end with Gregory and Henry. They were just the main event. The controversy dragged on for another 4 decades, exhausting everyone involved. Finally, in 1122, their successors signed the Concordat of Worms. It was the most medieval of compromises. Bishops would be chosen by the church, but the emperor had veto power. The pope would give them their spiritual authority, the ring and staff, while the emperor would give them their lands and secular authority by touching them with a scepter. They literally split the ceremony in 2. After half a century of war, excommunications, and anti-popes, the solution was paperwork and a slightly longer inauguration. The real winner, however, was the papacy. It had successfully broken the emperor's absolute control and established itself as a sovereign power, setting the stage for centuries of popes meddling in European politics. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more historical insights. Thanks for watching, nerds!